Today I'm going to walk through the Book of Ruth with you guys. It's a study that I've been doing. I was working with my high school Sunday school class, working through the Book of Ruth. I have about 8 girls in my high school Sunday school class, so I was like, let's learn about some of the women in the Bible. So we dove into the Book of Ruth, and there's so many great truths, and it's a terrific story. So we're going to kind of walk through just the first 2 chapters. So it's going to be a fast journey through the Book of Ruth for you guys. We took a couple of weeks on it. But before I get there, I just want to explain. I was praying for God for a message. What should I bring to Renew Church? What's the message that really I need to hear? It's always something that I need to hear. So every time I tell my Sunday school class, if you're learning something, it's because I needed to learn it. Or if you're hearing it, it's because it's something that God needed to work in me, and I'm just using you guys. So it's, again, something that I also need to learn, and it's something that I worked at a Christian camp this summer. I got the blessing to work for a Christian camp this summer as a ministry director, and it was remarkable to see all these kids, elementary school age kids and middle school kids, coming to Christ, getting to hear for the first time maybe who Jesus is, because they don't get it to experience that at home. And then they have all these questions, and a question that kept coming up was, why does God allow so many bad things to happen? And it's not just from the kids that I was hearing it, it's from parents, it's from friends of my own. I had, she wouldn't mind me sharing a story. I had a friend of ours that my wife went to college with, and a couple months into her pregnancy, she found out that the baby wasn't going to last long. He had, I can't think of the name of the disease right now, but he had a defect that he was only going to live a few minutes at the most outside the womb. She chose to carry on, and she carried the baby to full term, and we prayed. Our church was praying, and she got more than a couple minutes. She got 30 days with him. So bless the Lord that she got to experience that. But man, why does all these things happen? So let me compose myself. God allows these things to happen for us to learn lessons. And the book of James, it's a small book, but it's a great book. And 1 James 1:2 says this. I know it by heart, but let me just get it. 1 James 1:2 says this. Well, James 1:2 says this. It says, Consider pure joy, my brothers and sisters, that whenever you face trials of any kind, know that I'm testing you for the perseverance of your faith. So God is giving us stuff so that we can come to know him more. He's giving us something that either we need to learn a lesson from, or people around us need to learn a lesson from. And he uses his people. He uses his people to show that here's Matt, or here's someone that is following me, and I'm going to put them through this trial, or I'm going to put them through this heartache, so you can see how much they depend on me, and how much they love me, and how much I love them, because I'm going to bless them even more after this. And that's what God does. God blesses those who have faith in him. And I heard it said, this spoken word video that you guys just saw, there's a spoken word pastor named Clayton Jennings who did one on why bad things happen to good people. And he says, it's like we're a piano. And a piano by itself isn't going to do anything. And if a piano isn't tuned, it's not going to make beautiful music. So what you have to do to a piano is you have to stress it, and you have to tighten those strings, and you have to stretch those strings to the absolute limit of them breaking for it to produce beautiful music. And that's what God kind of does to us sometimes. He stretches us and he stresses us, but he never breaks us. And it's for us to be able to make beautiful music for him, for people to see his light in us and his love in us, and how we are just devoted to him, and that we could do anything with our faith, no matter what is thrown at us, so long as we keep that faith in God and we keep persevering through those. We're going to learn those lessons, and others around us are going to learn the lessons that God wants us to know. So it's just a remarkable thing, and we see this in the book of Ruth. And another thing, I was worried about this talk. I was like, I don't know. But then Tom sung "My Redeemer Lives," and in the story of Ruth, you see a redeemer. And you're going to see 4 characteristics of a redeemer in the book of Ruth. So it was great that that song was here. It just kind of gave me, yeah, I'm giving the right message. So as we go in, we'll just walk through it. Like I said, and I'm convinced that the sovereignty of God is rock solid, all right? I know that God's word is a solid foundation for us all to stand on, and we can trust in him. And we don't always know why God ordains different things. Like I said, it's always for our benefit, though. So if we're going through something, God wants us to learn something in those moments. And I wrote here that the providence of God is perplexing, and his mercies sure seem mysterious to us at times. We don't understand why he does what he does, but he knows what he's doing. He definitely does. And there was an 18th century hymn writer named William Cowper. I always want to call him Cowpepper, who was in an insane asylum, and in that insane asylum, he found Christ. So amidst this darkness, he finds Christ, and he starts to write these beautiful hymns, and he's discovered that storm clouds of trials and difficulties come, but God uses those same rain clouds to shower mercy on us. He uses those difficulties to show us mercy, and he rains those mercies on us. So this is his hymn. A couple lines from his hymn that he wrote. It says, God moves in mysterious ways. His wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Deep in unfathomed minds of never-failing skills, he treasures up the brightest design and works his sovereign will. Ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds ye so much dread are big with mercy, and shall break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust in him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. His purpose will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. Blind unbelief is sure to err, and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. So here's this author of this beautiful hymn who was in an insane asylum is now finding Christ and finding that even in the darkest times, even in these storms, God is showering mercy. And in this darkest of place, light is shown in this insane asylum into this man. So is that true? Are storm clouds of trials, difficulty, hurt, and pain, and grief really filled with mercy? Behind God's frowning providence on earth, is there really a smiling face in heaven? Those are my questions. How can we know that the bud will taste? Knowing that the bud is bitter, how do we know that the blossom is going to be sweet? So we might be asking, I know this is something that I ask God all the time. So what is God doing in my life? What I'm wondering what he has done or why he's done what he's doing. And I ask these questions, and I'm sure you guys have that same thing out there. Is why does God allow these things to happen? So even if you're not walking through a storm cloud right now, they're going to be there. All right? These storm clouds are going to pop up. These trials are going to come into our lives, and they're going to be there. But just know that right behind those storm clouds is God's mercy trying to shine through, and he's trying to tell us something. If we let it, and if we let God work. If we let God work, he's going to work in us. So we come to, what's become my favorite story is in the book of Ruth. All right? So I can't help coming today to this story to show you how sovereign God weaves everything together. All the details of our lives, God is weaving. There's nothing by accident, nothing that is unplanned. God has planned everything, and he's weaving everything together for our good, but for his glory. So if you have your Bibles with you today, I'd ask you to open them up to Ruth Chapter 1. And like I said, we're going to take a little journey into the book of Ruth. All right, you might want to I'll pause if you want to take some notes, but in chapter 1, we get a feel for who Ruth is, who Naomi is. We're going to get to know these main characters. And then in chapter 2, like I said, I'm going to show you 4 characteristics of a redeemer and what a redeemer does. So let's start with Ruth 1. Now, keep in mind that Ruth is only 2 books in the Bible that are written or about a woman, and it's the only book in the Bible that is named after a non-Jewish person. So that was pretty like, hey, I didn't even know that. And what is the other book of the Bible that's named after a woman? Does anybody know? Esther. And that's what we named our new, we have a new little baby girl who's about 3 weeks old now, and her middle name is Esther because she's a strong woman. But now I've come to know Ruth, and I'm like, maybe we'll change her middle name. But so let's journey into Ruth. So it says in verse 1, in the days when the judges ruled, there was famine in the land, and the man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn into the country of Moab, and he, his wife, and his 2 sons. All right, so let's stop right there. So the time and the place of Ruth come after Joshua and Judges. So it's after a time when God has now led his people into the promised land. So with the book of Joshua, everyone has now come in, God's people has come into the promised land. And then we travel into the book of Judges, and God's people now that he gave this land that he promised them is now turned their back on God. They're turned their ways from God and are doing, at the end of Judges, it says everyone is doing what's right in their own eyes. So now everybody's just doing what they think they want to do and what they feel is right, not what God thinks is right. So here he is. He's given them this country. He's given them this beautiful land. And they've turned their back on him and is doing what's right in their own eyes. And the book of Judges, if you guys haven't read it, it's a good book, but it's a definitely hard book to read because of just the depravity of man that you see throughout that book. So now that we know the time, we notice a place. The story begins in Bethlehem, all right? And Bethlehem means the house of bread, which is funny too because now we're in a time of famine. So it's called we're in the city of Bethlehem, the house of bread, but there's no bread to be found. We're in a famine. So this time and this place leads this Jewish man to leave his homeland and go to a foreign land to find food. And he goes to Moab. All right, Moab is a foreign land, not only geographically to Bethlehem, but it's foreign spiritually. They are a people outside of God. And if you remember, I don't know if you guys, but in Genesis 19, that's where we hear about the people of Moab. It's Lot had an incestuous relationship with his daughter. That's the Moab people. So they're outside of God. And God said to them, the people of Moab, that down to their 10th generation, no one would be allowed in the assembly of God. So 10 generations have to pass before God will recognize them again. And what would happen is Israelites would have to travel through Moab, and the women of Moab would seduce the men and bring them into immorality and idolatry. And 24,000 Jewish men have died because of that. 24,000 Jewish men have died because of that. So needless to say, Jewish men tried not to go to Moab. Here, a Jewish man is now leading his family to Moab. All right. Now, verse 2 says, the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And they were, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, I've been trying to do it, Ephrates, from Bethlehem in Judah. They went to a country of Moab and remained there. A little side note, Elimelech, his name means God is king. All right? So in a place where there's no king, in a time that they're saying that there's no king, we see who the true king is. God is king. It's in Elimelech's name. God is king. So we're about to be introduced to this story now, and the next few verses introduces tragedy into the heart of this story. Now, I study Hebrew, so the Hebrew language is very, Tom used this word again today before setting up. He used the word staccato, which means like separated. It's a clip style. It's very hard. It's very unemotional kind of language, the Hebrew language. It's a very unemotional language, and we're going to see why as we go through this story. So, verse 3 through 5 says this, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moab wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. They lived there for about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. There it is. In a matter of 3 verses, you have 10 years of tragedy. All right, we don't know when each of them died. We know that the husband died first, and then we don't know that if within those 10 years, if the sons died at the same time or if they died shortly thereafter, one after the other. But here is this family that has just been decimated, all right? So first Elimelech, the leader who had brought them into the strange land, dies. Now she's raising her 2 sons, and her 2 sons die. Now it's 3 women. It's Naomi, this Israelite, and 2 Moab women that are living together. And they're at a loss. They don't know what to do. So if you can imagine, this is like a curse among curses for Eastern family in Israel. To be the sole survivor of your family is terrible because you have no one to carry on. And in the Bible it says that your brother-in-law or your a son will take care of you if the husband dies, or if your son dies, the younger son will take care. But she has no one now to take care of her, and now these women have no one either. So this sets up this huge problem for this book and this huge problem for this family. And then you'll notice that in verse 5, the author doesn't even mention Naomi's name. It says this, the Bible says, the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Naomi has now virtually, not only has she lost her family, but she's lost her identity. The author kind of puts that out because he doesn't even write her name in that passage. She has been left out and she has lost her identity. She's an aged woman with 2 barren daughter-in-laws from Moab. She has no hope, no security, no home, no future, nothing. She feels, we must feel also the weight of this order, of how, just all this down on her. She has no family. She has no sense of security anymore because she has no income. She has no homeland because she's in a foreign land. So this is a distraught woman, and we're going to hear how distraught she is. So at a time when when a suffering woman and her 2 foreign daughters find themselves with no provision and no security, finding themselves in utter hopelessness, in verse 6 it says this, then she arose with her daughter-in-laws and returned from the country of Moab. She heard that in the fields of Moab that the Lord has visited his people and given them food. So now Naomi hears that, all right, back in Bethlehem, people are doing good again. The Lord is looking down upon them now, and food is coming. She wants to go home. So she wants to leave. And this is the first time we hear the Lord's name mentioned. He has restored the house of bread. He's restored Bethlehem. It was intended to be this way. So it just is neat to see how God is working right now. So her family is decimated. She has nothing. But here now, back in her homeland, God has started to bring the people back, and he's released the famine. He's started to produce food again. And so now she goes, let's go back home. So in verse 7, she sets out from the place where she was with her 2 daughter-in-laws, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. Now listen to the way that Naomi says this next thing. At some point, this is like the most important facet of the book of Ruth. All right, is this dialogue. And this is the first time anybody is actually speaking besides the author of the book. And it says this. At verse 8 and 9, but Naomi said to her 2 daughters, go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with me and dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant you and may you find rest each of you in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them and lifted her voice up and wept. All right, so this is not really just a goodbye and a God bless you. This is Naomi pouring out her kindness, saying, look, I have nothing. I'm going back to I don't know what. There's a life for you here. These are your people. Stay with your people. So this is her trying to show some kindness. And it seems like she's not being kind, but Naomi is showing her kindness here. But you got to imagine what these 3 women have been together, through together. The loss, the death, just hopelessness. So they don't want to go. So Ruth and Oprah, leaving their people to marry Israelite men, have also set them aside and set them apart from their people. So you can only imagine, like I said, the emotion that's going on here. But they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. They wept together. As As Naomi speaks, loud weeping emerges among the three of them, and they consider not being together. As a sign of continued kindness, Naomi says to them, "No, we will go," Naomi says. And then they say, "No, we will go with you." And Naomi basically builds an argument for why they shouldn't go back. All right, and this is her reasoning. It's pretty solid. But Naomi says, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that you may have become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should stay, I have hope. Even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait until they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of God has gone out against me." So if they stay in Moab, they can find other husbands. But if they go with her, there's not a guarantee. They're going over to Israel. These are Moabite women. They were told not, Israelite men were told to stay away from Moabite women. So there's not any chance, she's saying, for them. You have a chance here. You don't have a chance with me. And then Orpah kind of takes her up on it. She says, "You know what? You make a sound judgment. You're making sense. I'm going to stay." So Naomi saying this, there is no hope for me. There will be hope. There's no hope if you come with me. And it's heightened in that last sentence. In verse 19 it says, "And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town stirred because of them. And the woman said, 'Is this Naomi?' The word is out and the town is shocked. Could this be Naomi?" Now Naomi's name means pleasant. So listen to what happens as soon as they call her this. Is this the pleasant one? All right, so she's already told Orpah and Ruth to stay. They at first said no, but now Orpah's rethinking it, and she says, "No, I'm going to go." All right, and Ruth clings to her. All right, Ruth clings to Naomi, and this is what happens to Naomi when she gets back to Bethlehem. In verse 20 and through 21, it says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Lord Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" All right? How's that for a greeting? After 10 years, you eagerly have gone up to this woman who you've missed, and this is how she greets you. You say, "Hey, Naomi, how's it going? Haven't seen you in 10 years. And she says, "Don't call me Naomi. That's not my name. I'm bitter. So call me Mara." And that Mara means bitter. So based on those last words in chapter 1, we get our impression that she might not be too positive at this point. You know, Naomi, like I said, she's bitter, all right? But she's just been through a lot. She's been through a lot of tragedy. She's been hit blow after blow. So we can't judge her too harshly on that, all right? Listen, and I don't want you to miss this part that says, just like in the book of Job, Job was never said to have any sin. Like, I'm sure he sinned, but there was never anything that God marked against him for calamity to happen in Job's life. And just like in the book of Ruth here, nothing has been said about Naomi's sin of why she's been dealt this tragedy, all right? Which is just, like I said, it's just great how God works. Like, yeah, he's allowed things to happen. But there's not any indication that there's sin at all in Naomi's life that led to her point. She followed her husband's leadership. She moved to a foreign land. She cared for her daughters, her daughter-in-laws, and her son. She wasn't perfect, but there's still that unwarranted tragedy that's happening in her life, and she doesn't know why. Do you guys ever feel this way? Do you ever feel like the providence God has been hard on you? Do you feel that weight of just circumstances are too heavy to bear? I know, like, things in my life have come up, and I felt that burden on my shoulders that I can't bear this anymore, or why is this happening to me? But if you guys are going through that, I know that God is working to do something incredible in your lives. This is a woman who's been honestly hurt, and I'm guessing that, like I said, for some of you guys in this room, she's saying that she's bitter. She's saying that God has gone out against her. But we've all been at that point where we've questioned, God, why are you doing this to me? if we're honest with ourselves, I know that it's something that I've asked. Why is this happening to me, God? Why are you allowing this to happen to me? And not just from Naomi's perspective, but now imagine this whole scene that just happened with her coming into the town. She's saying that she left Bethlehem full, and now she's come empty. But she has Ruth standing right next to her this whole time this conversation is going on with this woman. So Naomi's standing right next to her. I come back with nothing. The Almighty has brought calamity upon me. And there's Ruth standing here. Calamity has been, is by me. And all of a sudden now, all the women shift their focus from Naomi, and now they're looking at Ruth over here. All right, this is the object of of God's kind of tragedy on my life. This is what I have to show for is Ruth standing next to me. So you could just imagine what Ruth is going through at this point. So if you look down on this as you're, just as this picture is unfolding and Naomi's talking and Ruth is there, it doesn't look good for Ruth. And when we get to verse 22, the writer says this: So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the country of Moab. So in that sentence, the writer now puts that staple or that sign on Ruth that she's a Moabite. She's no longer referred to just as Ruth anymore throughout the scripture. She's referred to Ruth the Moabite. All right, so it just puts that mark on her. And it's something just really slick that the author put in there. Like he just kind of slid that back in there just to make an emphasis. And I'm going to bring that point back, that emphasis on Ruth the Moabite. All right, so both in Ruth and Naomi's life, just think about their story, how it touches so many other stories that could be us. Everyone's lost somebody in this room. Everybody has been on hard times in this room. We can just feel that story. It doesn't just happen. It's not just happening to Naomi. It's not just happening to Ruth. This is things that happen in our day-to-day lives to people around us. For there are times when we are tempted to think that God is far from us, when we are surrounded by famine, longing for something that we don't have, when everything seems foreign to us. We might find ourselves in just a different place physically, emotionally. There's just times that come up when we just feel that we're that far away from God. When death strikes, there's pain that just won't seem to go away. Maybe it was expected, the death. Maybe it wasn't. It's just something that stays with us. And in our current circumstances, we just feel like there's no way out sometimes. And amidst the barrenness, amidst the loneliness, in our grief, in our hurt, we cry out, we wrestle in our shame. We struggle with things we're not proud of, and things that we just don't understand. And we know that God is using these things. In all these things, and I don't mean to be depressing here, but in all these things we begin to, is God really near? And this is what I love about the first chapter and how it ends. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of harvest. So through all this calamity, through all these things that are happening to Naomi and her family, something good has just happened at the end of the chapter. A harvest is happening in Bethlehem, and that's where they're going back, and God is going to start really working. The chapter ends with that note of hope of harvest, the harvest in God. Naomi has no idea what lies ahead, and in those harvest fields, for she came back saying, I am empty, but she has no idea that standing next to her, in that person of Ruth, is the fullness of God. She has no idea that God is about to weave together the story of all stories to show how gracious and unfathomable blessings towards her. All right, and I don't want you guys to miss this, that in the moment of despair, when God seems the furthest from you, he may actually be setting the stage for you guys. He'd be setting the stage to show his greatest demonstration of faithfulness to you. Amidst your sorrow, God may actually be plotting your satisfaction. For throughout all history of his people, God has ordained sorrowful tragedy and then set the stage for the greatest triumphs. So even though we've gone through some heartache, God is there, and he's going to produce a great triumph in our lowest of lows. All right, so now Ruth and Naomi are back. They come with two basic needs when they come back to Bethlehem. They come with two basic needs. They need food and they need family. So look at me we're going to go into Ruth chapter 2, verse 1. It says this: Naomi had a relative of her husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Enter Boaz. All right, two key facts about Boaz is it's said in his name. Other things say he's a prominent nobleman. In here it says he's a worthy man. It's talking about his financial situation. He's a very well-to-do rich man, but he's also a worthy man of the Lord. He follows God, and his heart is pure. So it just shows this man, Boaz, who's going to be introduced to the story. In Ruth 2:2 it says this, and Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean amongst the ears of grain after him, in whose sight I shall find favor. And she said, Go, my daughter. You see, God has set up a way for Israel to care for the poor and provide harvest for them at the time. So God told landowners that after they've reaped their fields, that they should leave some of that reaping, what they call gleaning, for those that are poor or less fortunate. They could come into the land on the edges of the field and pick up crops so that they can eat also. So it's a great thing that God had set up and the people of Israel had set up, is to leave that portion of the field for people that didn't have anything. So with her mother-in-law's permission, Ruth sets out to the field to collect a bit of grain at the mercy of the landowner who might let a Moabite woman work in his field. And this is where it gets good. All right? So Ruth 2:3 says this. So she sets out and went to glean in the field after the reapers. To become part of, she happened to come to the part of the field that belonged to Boaz. She happened. I find that funny. She happened to come to the part of the field that belonged to Boaz, a family member, but not only a family member, but someone that is going to end up taking care of her. And I just think, like, oh, it happened by accident. Nothing happens by accident. In this whole thing, God's sovereign hand is there, dealing in all those little tiny details. There's nothing accidental. She just happened. No, she didn't happen to just be there. It was ordained. God had placed her there in that field at that time so that this can happen. So I just love that there's no accidents. It just, And then if we didn't forget that Boaz is part of the clan of Elimelech. I don't want you guys to miss that. All right? So if we keep going up, in verse 2:4 it says, behold, Boaz came to Bethlehem. Behold. All right, so Boaz has been down in Bethlehem. He just happens to come up now at this time when Ruth is in the field. Like I said, there's no accidents. This is God saying, I know this woman is coming here. I'm going to make great things happen through this woman, and I need Boaz to be here. Let's go, Boaz, move your up to your fields and watch what happens. So now, Boaz just happened to walk up at that time. And this is like a sappy movie, like any kind of romance. But I'm a very sappy romance movie. I like romantic movies. And they're like, oh, this is just all too coincidental. Well, there's nothing coincidental. And you're like, oh, this is just setting the stage. But now we're engrossed in this story of now Boaz. Now Boaz kind of sees this going on. And he comes up to his people on the field, and he says, in verse 2:4 it says this. He says to the reapers, Lord, be with you. And they answer, the Lord bless you. Boaz is a knight in shining armor, blessing everybody left and right. All right? And then Boaz said to the young man who was in charge of the reapers, who is this young woman? And I love this part. Who is this young woman? So this is Boaz actually saying, hey, check her out, Who is this woman here? Check her out. And the foreman replies this. She is a young Moabite woman who's come back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let her glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers so she came and she continued from early morning until now. In other words, this woman from Moab has no husband, no one to care for her. This sets the stage for that first mark of the Redeemer, like I was telling you guys about. This is Boaz is their Redeemer. All right? This is a term that will be introduced into verse 20, but here's our Redeemer. He's made his stage. And the first thing about a Redeemer is a Redeemer seeks the needy as his family. So that's what a Redeemer does. A Redeemer looks for those who are in need, and he seeks them to bring them in as part of their family. All right? So Boaz sets, and he walks past all the other workers right up to Ruth. And then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go and glean in any other fields, or do not leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Now, this is like the Old Testament version of a pickup line. Don't go anywhere else. You stay here, I'll take care of you. You stay in my fields, and I'll make sure all the women take care of you. And he addresses her with a term of endearment as, with my daughter. The second part of a redeemer is he saves the needy from harm. And I'm going to kind of just go through this because I'm running out of time. He saves Ruth. He tells the men, because you can think about a time like this, a strange woman in a strange land, all these men around her out in the fields. You can gather what could be said or what could happen. And he said that no man should touch her. And so he's set already that he's keeping her out of harm's way. He said for her, if she needed a drink, go up and the men will get you something to drink. If you need something, go up and they will not bother you. So he has set himself up as her redeemer in the way that he is not going to let any harm come under her. I want you guys to see this part too. In chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, it says, all that you have done for your mother-in-law, and this is Boaz really recognizing the person of Ruth, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has fully been told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land to come to a people you didn't know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have now come to take refuge. And this is why you are experiencing all these blessings, because you have taken refuge under the wing of our Lord God. All right? And then Ruth kind of is like, you are my comforter. You have kind of saved me. Ruth is saying that she's the lowest person on that ladder. She's the lowest person on the rung, and you have shown me kindness. You have showed me compassion. All right? The third thing that a redeemer does is he serves the needy. He serves the needy at his table. So he brings now Ruth to his table, and he's feeding her. Now, the whole time he's feeding her, she's getting full on food, but she's also stuffing her pockets. She's stuffing her pockets with this food to bring back to Naomi so that Naomi has some food. And not only that, but there's, in Ruth 2:15, they say an ephah of barley, which is about a third or half a bushel of grain, which weighs about 30 to 50 pounds. She and the male workers would gather in a day about 1 or 2 pounds of barley. Here's Ruth, this strong woman, carrying 30 to 50 pounds of barley that she has gathered in one day's time. And it just shows that character of Ruth. She's buff, she's strong, and she's carrying all this barley to provide for her mother-in-law, and just to show the type of person that she is. It's just remarkable. It's just remarkable to me. And then when she's gathered all this and she's brought it back, and Naomi has seen all this stuff that she has brought, Naomi kind of hears something, and she goes, so what man did you meet today? And so she goes, well, I did meet a man. His name is Boaz. And then she goes in and tells the story of who Boaz is. And now her mom's playing matchmaker and says, no, you got to stay there, and Boaz will take care of us. He is my husband's family. He will take care of us. So I'm going to scroll up a little bit more. The next mark, that fourth mark of a redeemer, is that the redeemer showers the needy with his grace. All right. So in verse, I'm going to jump a little bit, but in chapter 4, verse 14, Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be a restorer of your life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap, and she became his nurse. The woman of the neighborhood gave him the name her child. The name, a son has been born to Naomi, and they named him Obed. All right? And if you guys don't know, Obed means to worship. So here Naomi was this once bitter woman who is now sitting here being blessed by her grandson, being blessed by a woman that was her daughter-in-law, who had no attachments really to her. She could have left, but Naomi Ruth stuck by Naomi's side, came back to this foreign land, shown that God has grace. It's not just and that's what I want you guys to see, it's not just with the people of Israel. Here God has blessed a Moabite woman and has blessed her so much that she is now the mother of Obed. And if you guys don't know who Obed becomes the father of Jesse, who is the father of King David. All right, so Ruth, this woman outside of Israel, this Moabite woman who was downcasted because of the incestual relationship between Lot and his daughter, those people were outcast. But here God grabs these people that were obscure for him and outcasted from him and blesses them so much that through Ruth's line now, through this Moabite woman's line, a king is born. And not only a king, but the greatest king of earth, and the king in David. And I'm just going to scroll up a little bit. And then, so for Jewish women and men who first heard this story, this was like the greatest postscript, because like at the end of verse 13, like you think the story's over. She gets married. They have a kid. The grandson is finally, Naomi's being blessed. So you think, all right, the story's over. It's a great story. But then it fades black for a minute, and then it comes back with who Obed is and who Obed's son becomes, and then who Obed's grandson becomes. It just sets that stage for this new story. So that God has just used a Moabite woman, in other words, a hopeless and an otherwise hopeless Israelite family, to bring about the most famous king of the Old Testament. And then the book ends with this genealogy of 10 generations, symbolic of the 10 years of the death and barrenness in Moab. And then when you look to the Israelite law that said no Moabite should be welcomed in the assembly of God down to the 10th generation, that book ends with that 10th generation from Perez all the way to King David. But the story doesn't end there. If you go with me, if in Matthew chapter 1, we have that whole genealogy, and this is where we begin to realize that this is not just a story of redemption at the point of Israel's history, but on a much grander scale. Because now we know what's happening in the New Testament, that Jesus didn't just come for the Israelites, he came for everybody. And this is where we go. So from the book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham, then they give all these names, and you get down to verse 5, and you see Solomon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, Boaz, the father of Obed, by who Ruth, and then Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. And this is exactly what we have read about. Then it goes down to verse 16, Jacob, the father of Joseph, and the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus Christ was born, and who is called Christ. So this all begs that question: what in the world is a Moabite woman doing in the lines of God, God's son? All right, and here you have it, and why God brought her up there. She is included in the family line, the same reason that any one of our names might be included from this family line. Not because we deserve to be there, not because we earned our way to be there, but because God has chosen at that time to put our names there in his family line. So without God's mysterious mercy sometimes, and why God does things, we don't know why, but he's done those things to bring him glory and to also bring us benefit and to bring us good. So for all those who are in Christ, we see it. We see who Ruth is. We are those needy, wandering workers in a field. There's nothing to draw us to the Lord of the harvest. In fact, all the factors are against us. We are outcasts. We are outsiders. When we are sinners, we are outside of God, desperately in need of favor. And the good news is the gospel is here, and that Redeemer is here who sought his family. God is seeking out for us. He's reaching out for us. I'm all the way over here, so far outside of God, and God pulled me to him. It's nothing that I did, and it's nothing that I could ever do to get myself to God. It was God reaching his hand out and says, Matt, I need you to become a part of my family. And he put me here, and he's done this. I would never have found this for myself, to be here talking to you guys about God, about his son, about his lineage. This is all a work of God, and it's nothing that I've done, and I'm just so blessed that I get to be here and do this and talk to you guys, because I was that outcast person that God has brought in and sheltered me under his wing. So God just showers us with his grace. Jesus is our Redeemer, and he has the right to redeem us. He is absolutely near us. When we are the furthest, or think we're the furthest from him, he is absolutely there among us, and he's just waiting to shower us with his mercy and with his grace. And it's just a remarkable story of how God just weaves everything together for his glory and for our benefits. I just want to leave you guys with this. This is a verse in Romans chapter 15:13, and it says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him." So as we trust in him, and that's what I ask for you guys, is to trust in God. As we trust in him, God fills us with all this hope, with all this joy, and with all this peace that can only come from trusting in him. So as we trust in him, even in those storm clouds, and they're going to come, I guarantee you, living a life as a Christian is not going to be easy. So when those storm clouds come, know that they're coming for a reason, that they're coming to show us something, or to show somebody else something in our lives, that we can overcome whatever is dealt with us, and we can do it with joy. Just as James said, consider it a joy to go through those trials, because God is using you in some way. So consider yourself privileged. I mean, it definitely does sound strange if affliction falls upon you, because God wants you to learn something, or somebody around you to learn something. So that's what I just want to close you with, that may God just fill you with all that hope. The God of hope just fill you with all that peace and joy as you trust in him.